Millions of people flock to Europe's most romantic and beautiful city every year. They walk its wide boulevards, sip coffee in cafes, and take photos in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower. For them, this city is a symbol of art, culture, and life. But most of them do not know that beneath the very stones they walk on, and directly under the roads where their cars drive, another world exists. A world that is silent, dark, and terrifying. This is the part of Paris that you won't see on postcards. This is the part that was hidden from the eyes of tourists. Just 60 feet below the surface of the earth, another city is inhabited. But in this city, no living human resides. The population here does not breathe. Here, there are only bones, skulls, and silence. These are the catacombs of Paris, the world's largest mass grave. The remains of more than 6 million human beings are present here. This number is actually greater than the current living population of Paris. If you descend into these tunnels, you will see bones stacked into the walls. This is not a decoration, nor is it a movie set. These were people who once walked the streets of this very city, laughed, cried, and dreamed. Farmers, nobles, the poor, ministers of kings, and common laborers, death has gathered them all together in the same darkness. But the question is, why did this happen? Why did such a developed and beautiful city need to settle a city of the dead beneath itself? The beginning of this story is not from today, but from centuries ago. This story is not just about death, but it is the story of the struggle that the living fought for their survival. This is the story of a time when Paris was not an example of beauty, but a place where even breathing had become difficult. To understand this reality, we have to go far back in time. Paris was not always like this. In the Roman era, this area was called Lutetia. The Romans had an obsession with building structures. They needed stones to construct grand palaces, bathhouses, and temples, and they found these stones beneath the land of Paris. For centuries, limestone was extracted from beneath Paris. Laborers would dig the earth, remove the stone, create tunnels, and move forward. Years passed, centuries went by. The city kept being built above, and the ground below kept becoming hollow. These mines had no proper maps. No one knew exactly how many tunnels had been formed underground. This hollow earth was like a time bomb that remained silent for centuries. Then came the Middle Ages. This was the time when the population in Europe was growing rapidly, but there was no system for sanitation or health. Paris had become a densely populated city. The streets were narrow, there was no drainage system, and diseases were common. But the biggest problem was not the living people, but the dead. According to the religious beliefs of that time, everyone wished to be buried near the church. In the center of Paris was the largest and most important cemetery, known as Les Innocents, or the Cemetery of the Innocents. This cemetery had been in use for centuries. Initially, there was space for burial, but as the city grew, space ran out. Then a series of disasters began. Wars, famines, and plagues attacked Europe. Specifically, plagues like the Black Death badly affected the population of Paris. People were dying like flies. The church did not have enough space to give each body a separate grave. Therefore, they adopted the method of mass graves. These pits were enormous. At one time, more than 1,500 bodies were thrown into a single pit. When one pit filled up, it was covered with soil, and another was dug. But the earth also has a limit. The Cemetery of the Innocents became so full of bodies that the ground surface had risen 2 meters, about higher than the surrounding streets. This was not soil, but a heap of human remains and rotting corpses covered by a thin layer of dirt. By the 17th and 18th centuries, the situation had gone out of control. A smell of rot and decay constantly lingered in the air of Paris. This stench was so severe that the food of nearby shopkeepers would spoil. People said that because of this smell, milk and wine would turn sour within a few hours. It became difficult to light candles because the oxygen in the air was low, and poisonous gases were high. But the church and the administration kept ignoring this problem. They did not want to break religious traditions. The priests said that removing the bodies was a sin. The people were also not in favor of disturbing the graves of their loved ones. But nature does not respect any belief. The earth was no longer capable of bearing more weight. In the year 1780, an event occurred that changed everything. The spring rains were unusually heavy. The ground softened. There were some houses with basements right next to the cemetery of the innocents. On May 30, 1780, a sound like a terrifying explosion was heard. When a restaurant owner opened the door to his basement, he trembled with fear. The wall of the cemetery had collapsed due to the pressure of the bodies and the rain. In his basement, instead of wine bottles and grain, hundreds of rotting corpses and bones lay scattered. This scene was so gruesome that panic spread throughout the city. Now, it was no longer just about the smell, it had become a serious health emergency. Doctors and scientists warned the king that if these bodies were not removed, all of Paris would fall victim to a plague for which there was no cure. The city's water had become poisonous, and the smell of death was in the air. King Louis V finally made a difficult decision. A decision that had never been made before. He ordered that all the city's cemeteries be emptied, but the question was, where to take these millions of skeletons? Building new cemeteries outside the city would take time, and space was also scarce. Then someone remembered that miles of those old tunnels existed beneath Paris, which had been lying empty since the Roman era. Those limestone mines that were making the city hollow were now about to become the means of saving the city. It was decided that these bodies would be transferred to these underground tunnels. This task was not easy. It was going to be the biggest funeral in history. The work began in April 1786. The administration decided that this transfer would only be done at night so that the people of the city would not be frightened, and the sanctity of the church would remain intact. Every night, as soon as the sun set, horse-drawn carriages covered in black cloth would gather outside the cemeteries. Laborers would dig up graves, remove bones, and load them into the carts. Priests would recite prayers over these bones. Then, this caravan would pass through the silent streets of the city by torchlight and reach the mouth of the tunnels. This process did not last for 1 or 2 days, but continued for several years. Every night, carts full of bones descended into the underground tunnels. Down there, laborers would throw these bones in a disorderly manner. In the beginning, it was just a pile of bones. There was no order, no arrangement. The only goal was to clean the city. But the atmosphere of these tunnels was strange. There was complete darkness, moisture in the air, and the temperature remained the same all year round. The people taking these bones down were entering a world where time had stopped. After some time, another problem arose. When the French Revolution came and the monarchy ended, a market of slaughter heated up in Paris. The bodies of those beheaded by the guillotine also began to be brought there. Now, these tunnels contained not just old bones, but fresh corpses as well. The credit for giving these tunnels a proper shape goes to an inspector named Ricard de Thury. In 1810, he took charge of these tunnels. He was an intelligent man. He saw that these piles of bones were not only unsightly but also dangerous because they could collapse and block the path. De Thury created an amazing plan. He decided that these bones would be given the form of a museum. He ordered the laborers to separate the femurs and skulls. Then, they began to stack these bones like walls. Today, when you see photos of the catacombs, where skulls are arranged in order, and walls of bones are built, this is the result of that man's hard work. He turned death into art. He also installed headstones from the old cemeteries in the tunnels and had phrases written on the walls that make humans realize the fragility of life. Among them, the most famous sentence is the one written at the entrance of the tunnel: "Stop. This is the empire of death." As this place became organized, it became a center of interest for people. In the 19th century, it became a mysterious tourist destination for the rich and nobility. Napoleon III also visited here with his son. Imagine, in the flickering light of candles, people walked among these bones, where the remains of millions of humans were watching them. But these tunnels were not just a home for bones. The network of tunnels beneath Paris spreads for about 300 kilometers. Only a very small part of it, about 1.5 kilometers, has been opened to the public, which is called the Catacombs. The rest is forbidden, illegal, and extremely dangerous. This forbidden part is where the real stories are born. It is very easy to get lost in these dark tunnels. There is no light here, no GPS signal works, and sound echoes. If your flashlight goes out, you will be trapped in absolute darkness, where the sound of your screaming cannot reach the surface. There are many events in history when people lost their way in these tunnels. The most famous and tragic event is from 1793, when a hospital doorkeeper named Philibert Aspert allegedly entered these tunnels to find a special type of wine. He was alone. He had only one candle. He never returned. 11 years later, his body was found in a desolate part of these tunnels. He had lost his way and died of hunger and thirst in the darkness. His body was buried right there, and his grave still exists today, serving as a warning to those who treat these tunnels as a joke. After World War II ended, the world changed, but the darkness beneath Paris remained the same. The tunnels that had been used for hiding during the war were once again deserted. However, the fear and attraction of these tunnels did not leave people's minds. In the 60s, new buildings began to be constructed in Paris, and engineers repeatedly faced the problem that whenever deep foundations were dug, human bones would emerge from below. This was proof that this city of death extended far beyond the lines drawn on maps. In this same era, a new culture began to thrive around these tunnels. This was the era of the cataphiles. These were people who, tired of the colorful life of Paris, went down in search of peace. For them, these bones were not a source of fear, but silent companions. But for the government, this was a major problem. People would get lost, and the fire brigade and police had to risk their lives to rescue them. For this reason, in 1955, the Paris administration passed a law making it a crime to enter the unofficial parts of these tunnels. But the ban only increased the curiosity. To deal with this situation, the Paris police formed a special unit commonly called the cataphlix. This is perhaps the only police force in the world that patrols underground to catch criminals. Their job is to remove tourists wandering in these caves and to seal off newly created entry points. But these tunnels are so vast that even the police cannot reach every corner. In the 90s, an event came to light that spread sensation throughout the world. This event is famous as the Lost Videotape. A documentary film crew found a camcorder inside these tunnels. When they watched its footage, they were stunned. In the video, an unknown person is wandering alone in these tunnels. Initially, he was calm and filming the walls of bones. But then suddenly, the video changes. The person starts to panic. His breathing becomes heavy, and he starts running. The video shakes. He is running wildly through dark paths, as if something, or some entity, is chasing him. Finally, he drops the camera on the ground and disappears into the darkness. The camera lies on the ground, recording until the battery runs out. Who was that person? What was he running from in fear? And did he ever make it out alive? These questions remain a mystery to this day. Some people say he might have gone mad from the fear of getting lost, known as catacombs psychosis, where absolute silence and darkness affect the human mind. According to scientists, there is absolute silence in these tunnels. This silence is so deep that you begin to hear your own heartbeat and the sound of blood circulating. The human brain is not accustomed to this kind of environment. When the brain receives no sound from the outside, it starts creating sounds itself. This is why people who go there often feel that someone is calling them or whispers are coming from behind the walls. This is not ghosts, but the human brain playing games with itself. But those who have been there say that the feeling is so real that it is impossible to deny. Another strange fact is that there are not only bones in these tunnels. The Sea of Paris also exists here. In some parts of the tunnels, there are underground water wells where the water is completely clear and transparent, but it looks deep blue. These wells are called the footbath. Illegal adventurers even take the risk of swimming in these cold waters. Imagine you are waist deep in cold water, There is complete darkness around you, and perhaps centuries-old bones are present at the bottom of the water. But the biggest danger of the catacombs is not supernatural forces, but the earth itself. Most of Paris stands on limestone that has been hollowing out for centuries. Geological experts inspect these tunnels constantly. They fear that if the roofs of these tunnels collapse, the large buildings of Paris will sink into the ground. Incidents have happened in the past, where large sinkholes appeared in streets, and the debris of houses fell into the tunnels below. That is why a special department, the IC, was created, whose sole job is to keep the foundations of Paris strong. They continuously build concrete pillars in these tunnels so that the world above remains standing. It is a strange irony that the grandeur of Paris rests on these pillars that have been erected amidst bones. If you take a legal tour of the Paris Catacombs today, you have to descend 130 steps through a spiral staircase. As you go down, the air gets cooler, and the city noise fades away. Then comes a long tunnel, and finally, you reach the door behind which millions of humans are sleeping. Seeing the bones there, the first feeling is not of fear, but of wonder and sadness. You see that there is no difference left in these bones. Rich, poor, revolutionaries, loyalists to the king, all have become one. There are no nameplates there. You do not know if the skull you are looking at belongs to a famous painter or a beggar. Death has erased all class distinctions. This place reminds a human of their reality. On some walls, bones have even been arranged in the shape of a heart. This was perhaps the workers' way of saying that even in this terrifying place there is room for humanity and love. But a strange smell always remains in the air, the smell of soil, old stones and dried bones, which is called the scent of death. Even today, there are many parts beneath Paris where no human has gone for the last 200 years. What is there? Perhaps old tools, perhaps the remains of lost people, or perhaps something we are unable to understand. These tunnels are a labyrinth that is part of Paris's existence. Paris is often called the City of Lights because it gave the world enlightenment and art. But the truth is that every light has a shadow. Paris's shadow is beneath its feet. This city could not bury its history. Instead, it preserved its history beneath itself. Next time you see the Eiffel Tower sparkling in a picture, or hear about the liveliness of the Champs-Élysées, remember that directly beneath this glitz and glamour, a silent army is lying down. 6 million people. They are not waiting, they are not waking up, they are just there. They are reminding us that no matter how much civilizations progress, eventually we all have to become part of the soil. The existence of Paris is indebted to these bones. If these bones had not been moved there, perhaps the plague would have spread above and the city would have become desolate. These dead people gave up their space to give the living a chance to live. It was a sacrifice, even if it was taken by force. So, this was the story of the European city that was built on bones. A truth that is stranger than fiction. Above the ground is the noise of life, and below the ground is the eternal silence of death. And between the two, there is only a distance of a few feet of soil.